Hello there, welcome back to our channel. I hope you're ready. With no delay, let's get started. In this episode, we will talk about God. But for this episode to make sense, we need to summarize some main ideas from the previous episodes. First and foremost, let's remember that our reality is made up of dualities. There is a relative reality and an absolute reality. For more information about duality, you can watch our video called What is Duality? The main idea is that apparently everything that exists has a beginning and an end, has an opposite, and is partial, finite. But what is important is that all dualities are unified in absolute reality. So, everything and every form of life that exists in relative reality in everyday life, although it has an opposite, the two parts unify in absolute reality, they become the same thing, and they are the two parts or two perspectives of the same thing. More specifically, everything that exists will have opposite characteristics in itself, but it will also itself have another opposite thing. For example, a block of ice will have a left side and a right side, and it will have a top and a bottom. But the moment you spin the block of ice, the left side will become the right side and the top will become the bottom. This is one level of relativity out of many levels of relativity. That is, in many ways, what was initially clear or absolute becomes the opposite of the original. For example, the top, if the piece of ice is turned upside down, will become the bottom of the piece of ice. Another example of relativity is that the opposite of ice is water. One side of duality is water and the other side, the opposite, is ice. But through absolute reality, we realize that both water and ice are water. That is, through absolute reality, we realize that the two parts of a duality are one thing seen from two perspectives. Absolute reality is what the two different objects are, but also the way in which the two are unified. I mean, absolute reality is both water and ice, and the process by which water becomes ice, but also the process by which ice becomes water. Okay, we also talked about infinity, and infinity means absolute reality and relative reality. I mean, the infinite is what gives life to finite parts. That is, the infinite is everything which is apparently finite. We talked about the fact that no finite thing can exist without the infinite existing. It's quite clear. I mean, please think of cells. They are a finite form, and they are made up of atoms, which are themselves finite, and so on. We'll never get to a finite base that gives life to the other finite parts, because that finite base would also have to be given life by another finite base. If we go by dual logic, relative logic, one finite form will give life to another finite form, and so on, but we will never arrive at the bottom line, as something that is final, as something that is the smallest or the largest form that gives life to other forms, because something will always be discovered beyond what has already been discovered. This is what infinity means. If you don't realize that there is no difference if you look through a microscope or a telescope, you don't understand what infinity is. It's easier to imagine infinity when you think about zooming out, about space. Then you have a clear reference for what infinity means, because you understand that space has no limits. But when you think about zooming in, that is, cells and atoms, you get the impression that there must be a bottom line, something that sustains everything, a certain shape from which atoms take form, and so on. But if you think like that, you have lost the essence of infinity. If infinity is truly infinite, it means that it is infinite in both zooming out and zooming in. That means you can zoom out in space infinitely, and you can zoom in a particle infinitely. And further, we are trapped in duality through words and ideas. The absolute, God, includes zoom in and zoom out. We still have the impression that zooming in and zooming out are two different things, but for the infinite, they are the same. I have said before, and I will say it again in order not to create confusion, that words will always limit me in expressing God, the infinite. So we have been talking about the infinite being made up of finite things, but because we are talking about the infinite, it cannot be really separated from itself. Infinity cannot truly separate from itself because it is whole. There cannot be two infinities, because they would unify, they would swallow each other and become one. So, because there is only one infinity, it is whole. I mean, it's like talking about a human being. A man is made up of many finite parts. A man has a hand, a leg, a finger, organs, blood, and so on. However, a heart will not function without a human. The heart will beat inside a human. Without the human body, it dies. The same works with all the other components of a human body. Every part, every finger, every organ functions because it is part of the human body, and the human body, it is a whole. This whole is called the human being. The same works for the universe. It is made up of all of us, all animals, all objects, everything that exists. Because it consists of everything that exists, it is whole. We talked last time about what the whole is. We also discussed that infinity has many facets. In this video, we will talk about God, which is in other words the same as infinity. First and foremost, we're going to talk about what God is not. God is not something you believe in or don't believe in. God is not an old man in the heavens, in the clouds, with a big white beard who judges you and gives you punishments. God is not a delusion that people who believe in Christianity or religious people believe in. God is not Satan's rival. God is not a voice that speaks to you in times of trouble if you pray to Him. God is not something that punishes you in hell for all you have done wrong and does not reward you in heaven for all you have done right. God, because He is infinite, is both good and evil. And that brings us back to duality, because for us as humans, through our dual thinking, we see some things as bad and some things as good. But to God, everything is good with a capital G. God is represented as being all-powerful and all-knowing, but to the lenses of religions, the same God is against some things. This is a major contradiction. If God is all-powerful and all-knowing, how can He be against Himself? If God created everything, how can Satan be His rival? There are the definitions of rival in the Oxford Languages Dictionary. A person or thing competing with another for the same objective or for superiority in the same field of activity, be or seem to be equal or comparable to. That being said, how can God, who is infinite, all-powerful, and all-knowing, have a rival? Do you see that it is a contradiction and misunderstanding that God is infinite? God cannot have a rival and cannot punish something He disagrees with. The reason these statements are contradictory is because God is infinite. That is, God has a duty to create everything it can create because it is infinite. This is a paradox. I mentioned it last time, and we will discuss it in more detail another time. From our limited perspective, we perceive some things as bad, but from God's perspective, everything that exists is good. As we talked about last time, infinity is not infinite if it is limited by what we as humans consider as good. If God is all-powerful and all-knowing and all-loving, that means He has created a perfect reality. Of course, you will ask yourself, Why couldn't God create a world without wars, without disease, without tragedy? Why couldn't God create a perfect world by my standards? And the answer is in the question. If you start with the idea that your standards of good are the best possible, you haven't understood what God means, and you haven't understood how the universe works. If you don't understand and realize that the mind through which you have these ideas is finite, and that you try to judge how the infinite exists through this dual logic, then of course evil things and Satan will exist, because you miss the essence of God. You pretend that you are on God's side and that you understand what it wants, but in fact you are very, very far from understanding it. You don't follow the logic by which you can understand it. As I was saying, if you go by dual logic, you will always need something finite to support another finite part. How can an old body, a finite limited body, have infinite powers? If you believe that God is all powerful, then automatically you must believe that God is infinite. The problem is that you don't think further. You let yourself be guided by society and religion, and you don't really see God. Because if you did, you would realize that you have blind spots in your thinking. Slowly, you would realize that God is beyond human thinking. You would realize that the infinite God implies new rules, rules so profound that they are not logical to the human mind. Because, of course, from the human perspective, pain is a negative and bad thing, but from the perspective of God, pain is necessary, because otherwise, God would not be infinite, would not contain all that God can contain. And you will ask yourself, how is it possible that God, who is all powerful, can create something evil and negative? This is the wrong question. From the very beginning, you started with the wrong idea. Why? Because from the start, you consider that what you call as bad and negative is in reality bad and negative. Of course, you will believe that there are bad things in reality and in life if you believe that you have the right opinion. As long as you consider that your opinion is reality, you consider that in the universe are the same rules. This perspective is wrong. What you as an individual think is bad is not really bad in the universe. For example, the brutality that you see in a lion hunting a zebra is just the lion's way of making a living, is the lion's way of feeding itself, just like the zebra that eats grass and runs away from the lion when it's hunted. The lion makes a living by hunting the zebra, and the zebra makes a living by running away from the lion when hunted. Obviously, you will see the zebra as the prey and the lion as the predator, but you will see the zebra as the positive and the lion as the negative. But for God, both the zebra and the lion are positive characters. As I said, because God is infinite, He cannot create an imperfect reality. And if God has created a perfect world, being all loving, it means that He loves all that He has created, and all that He has created out of love. For God, an ant is no different from a man, a zebra is no different from a lion, health is no different from sickness, and so on. Wonder why? The reason is that it loves all that it created equally. And now we go even deeper into what infinity and duality means. God cannot be separated from what it creates. If God was separated from what it creates, that will make it finite. Because God is infinite, God is what it creates. Considering the process by which the universe is created, the first factor is God, the second factor is the process of creation, and the third factor is creation. Do you notice how all these factors are finite? Do you notice how the essence of infinity has been lost? God cannot separate itself from what it creates, because it will no longer be whole, it will no longer be infinite. For more on how infinity works, please watch our video called What is Infinity? Because God is infinite love, infinite intelligence, infinite power, everything it creates is a limited form of itself, finite in appearance. So the world we experience is God in physical, material form. God, because it is infinite, it means that it is whole, and that means that it cannot be separated from itself. That means that there is no separation between it and its action of creating something. That means that there is no separation between it and action, between it and what it creates, between its action and creation. That is to say, the whole process of creation, which begins with it and ends with what it creates, everything is it. God is the creator, is the action of creation, and is creation. In other words, what you call and understand as God as something different from you, separated from you, what you understand as an enormous power, a being other than you and the world around you, is actually all that surrounds you, and it is actually you. If God is omnipresent, that means it is always around you, right? If God is always around you and is truly omnipresent and infinite, it means that it is in you. Why would you be separated from the world around you? Do you notice how this duality forms in your thinking? The moment you see yourself as separated from the world around you, a duality is formed. It is the duality between you as inner and everything else as outer. Because God is infinite, it cannot separate from itself. Thus, it is omnipresent. This has several implications. This notion is the step towards advanced spirituality. The moment you truly realize that God is omnipresent, and that implies that God is also in you, and that means that you are God, you begin to awaken from the illusion, the matrix, whatever you want to call it. The moment you truly realize that God is in you, the question will be, isn't it a duality if I consider God to be part of me and I am the rest of me? If the dual logic is correct, then how can God be only a part of me? The duality of your inner self is formed, where you see God as one side of the inner duality and you see yourself as the other side of the duality, because you don't feel or perceive yourself as God. You feel yourself as you. You have a personality, things you like and things you don't like, things that define you and things that don't define you. The moment you realize that you are part of the universe, and the universe is infinite, and God is infinite, you realize that you are God. As I was saying, the boundaries between dualities or between differences are illusions. They are imaginary. They are differences only on the surface, and the more you study them, the more you realize that the two opposites are just two parts of the same thing. So the duality between you, the inner world, and the universe, the outer world, is just an illusion. You feel that you are different and separated from the universe, but because the universe is infinite, it is whole. And because the universe is God, you are God. God is the whole universe, and by definition, the universe being infinite, it means that it is whole. Because the whole cannot be separated from itself, it means that everything in the universe is one being, and that being is God. Because God is the universe and is infinite, it means that it has the infinite power. It is all powerful. Thus, it has absolute power to take all its power in appearance. And so the world is created, life as we know it. God is infinite with a capital I. It is absolutely infinite. And that means that it has the power to create the illusion of being finite. That is, you who are listening to me now are God, and you don't realize that you are God precisely because you are God and you wanted to take all your godly power. You wanted to exist as something finite in appearance. You are God at this moment, but you don't realize it because you are too caught up in the dual illusion that you have created for yourself. We will talk more about this in the following episodes. God is a state. God is not a he, rather, it is an it. God is not female or male. It is not a being separated from you. God is a state that you can reach from your actual state, rather, a state you can awaken to. God is something that cannot be described by words or thoughts, because God is infinite, it is complete, it is whole, it is almighty, all-knowing, and all-powerful. From this state, all that God can do is to experience itself. God apparently divides into infinite finite parts, such as a rock, a car, a tree, a color, an animal, a man, and of course, you. God divides itself to experience itself and created the illusion of separation. And at this moment, you, the one who is listening to me now, have the impression that you are a human being separated from me, separated from the outside world. You have the impression that you are only a person, that everything around you is separated from you. You have the impression that you are listening to someone else at this moment. You have the impression that you are listening to another human being right now. The absolute truth is that in this moment you are listening to yourself. In this moment you are talking to yourself and you don't even realize it because you are trapped in the illusion of separation. Do you realize now how great your power is? It is so great that even in the moment in which you tell yourself that you are talking to yourself, you don't realize it. If you completely understood that, you would be enlightened this second. But because you are God, you have created such a powerful illusion. You have taken all your godly power, and it is very difficult for you to come out of the illusion and get your power back. Even though you have felt what I have said and seem to understand it, you still feel and experience life as a mere human. And you will ask yourself, what is the reason why, even though I understand that I am God, I cannot awaken or realize or become aware that I am God? It's one thing to realize 1% that you are God, and it's another to become enlightened and realize it 100%. Just as I said previously, words limit me in expressing exactly what I want to say about God. The point is that, at this moment, even if you seem to have understood what I said about you being God, you still feel and experience yourself as human. And you will ask me, why do I still feel like a person? Why don't I have magical powers, or why don't I feel the power of God? The answer is that you as God still want to experience yourself as a human, and your God power that you don't currently feel is greater than your ego power. You as God still want to be a human, and you can only awaken partially to the fact that you are God. I mean, the ego that you created as God is still very powerful. I mean, you, God, you have created an ego, and you have your name, your body, your personality, and your characteristics. You, God, have limited yourself and created yourself as an ego, your persona. You have so much power as God that you can't instantly get it back because you don't want to. You have created an illusion, the illusion of being human, so strong that even the moment you realize for the first time that you are God, you won't be able to get all your power back. The process of taking your power back is called enlightenment. It is the process by which the ego develops, evolves, and awakens to the truth that it is God. We will discuss the ego in detail in the next episode. Until then, be safe.